On February 21st, 1965, civil rights leader Malcolm X is assassinated while giving a speech at the Audubon Ballroom in New York City's Washington Heights.
But why did he change his last name to X? And were Malcolm X and MLK enemies? Also, why were those convicted of his killing later released?
Malcolm X was born Malcolm Little in Omaha, Nebraska in 1925. His father was a Baptist preacher and a black nationalist. Threats from the KKK forced the family to move to Lansing, Michigan. When Malcolm was 6, his father was killed in what was officially ruled a streetcar accident, but many believe it was murder. Malcolm was taken from his family by welfare caseworkers at age 12. He dropped out of high school and moved to Boston, where he got into trouble with the law. At 21, he was convicted of burglary. In prison, he encountered the teachings of Elijah Muhammad, the leader of the Nation of Islam. The group advocated black nationalism and radical separatism. Malcolm joined and decided to take the last name X to symbolize his stolen African identity. After his release, he became a fiery black Muslim leader in Harlem. In contrast to Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm advocated black liberation by any means necessary. Let's dive a little deeper into the relationship between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. Malcolm X once derisively called MLK Reverend Dr. Chicken Wing. As author James Cone said, quote, "King was a political revolutionary. Malcolm was a cultural revolutionary. Malcolm changed how black people thought about themselves." End quote. Dr. King and Malcolm X are often, maybe too simplistically, seen as polar opposites. Yes, they definitely had different religious views. Yes, they definitely espoused different methods in the fight for civil rights. But this idea of them being pitted against each other was, in many ways, a creation of the media. They in fact had many mutual friends, but the two icons met in person only once, on March 26, 1964, in an unplanned meeting on the street after a King press conference. As the civil rights movement progressed, they began to express respect and admiration for each other. In the months before Malcolm's assassination, the two were gravitating toward each other. Malcolm X, especially, was becoming less extreme. A great example of this was in Selma, Alabama, just 17 days before his death, in the midst of the important nonviolent efforts there. Young civil rights workers invited Malcolm to speak, but there was hesitancy at what he might say. MLK was in jail in Selma at the time, or he may have blocked the speech. What Malcolm X said was surprising to many. He said he was 100% behind the effort in Selma. He went on to say, quote, "People would do well to listen to Dr. King and give him what he's asking for, and give it to him fast before some other factions come along and try to do it another way. What he's asking for is right." End quote. In those final months, Malcolm had become critical of Elijah Muhammad and left the Nation of Islam in 1964. Less than a year later, Malcolm X was gunned down by members of the Nation of Islam. Muhammad would always disclaim any responsibility for the murder. Malcolm's assassination was one of the 4 major assassinations in the U.S. in the 1960s. It came less than 2 years after the 1963 assassination of U.S. President John F. Kennedy, and just over 3 years before the 1968 assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr. and U.S. Senator and presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy. There is still a lot of mystery surrounding Malcolm X's assassination. 3 members of the Nation of Islam were charged, tried, convicted, and sentenced to 20 years to life. 2 of them, Norman Butler and Thomas Johnson, were paroled in the 1980s and were publicly exonerated in 2021. The third, Thomas Hagen, was eventually paroled in 2010, but has not been exonerated. Hagen, in fact, has admitted to his involvement and has even expressed regret. He has said he planned the shooting with 4 others, but has maintained that the other two men that were convicted along with him were never a part of it. Hagen has also said that the killing was done as revenge for Malcolm's criticism of Elijah Muhammad. Malcolm X's death remains controversial. To this day, like many believe with other prominent 1960s assassinations, there are those who maintain that there was a government conspiracy behind it. Here are other events that happened today in history. In 1848, German-born economist and political theorist Karl Marx publishes the Communist Manifesto. In 1863, during the American Civil War, the all-black Massachusetts 54th begins training its first soldiers. In 1885, after 37 years of construction, the Washington Monument, a 550-foot obelisk, is dedicated. In 1948, the National Association for Stock Car Racing, or NASCAR, is founded in Daytona, Florida. In 1990, pop duo Milli Vanilli wins a Grammy Award for Best New Artist, which is later revoked. In 1994, CIA operative Aldrich Ames is arrested for selling secrets to the Soviet Union from 1985 to 1991. In 2022, Medina Spirit's victory at the 2021 Kentucky Derby is disqualified because of a failed drug test. And now, it's time for our Today in History quiz. What was the nickname of Benito Mussolini's fascist paramilitary group? The Black Shirts, the Brown Shirts, the White Shirts, or the Red Shirts?
Liked learning about Malcolm X? Then you'll love this one about Martin Luther King Jr. Tap the screen to keep the story going on Today in History.